we're going to get into more detail on the Vesica Pisces and how this really represents the two seeds, the enmity between the two seeds going back all the way to the beginning of Genesis. We're going to talk about how this also represents the magnetic field being interrupted. Well, what is the magnetic field? The magnetic field is the Taurus field. It's the apple. Now, I got this overlay here. I'm going to pull this up for you guys so we can take a look at this. And what you're looking at here is the Vesica Pisces. Now, this is an archetype image. This is something that you've seen before. And it's two circles, and they're overlaid. And we see this at the Washington Monument in Washington, D.C. But what you fail to understand or fail to realize is that what this is really representing is two seeds, two cells, two eggs. And this is representing basically the incursion of the bloodline that came in and basically contaminated the human race. Now I'm going to prove this to you. This is the magnetic field. Okay, this was the original garden. We had the tree of life. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. That's why an apple looks like a tree with branches going out, curving around, roots coming out from the bottom, curving around, and they connect in the sides, and you get this effect. At the center is the seed. This is the stillness. So these are two twin opposed vortexes. What is a twin opposed vortex? A vortex is like a tornado. Imagine the toilet flushing, and it's spinning around like a whirlpool. And you have one whirlpool sucking in and another whirlpool sucking in on the bottom. And in the middle, you have perfect stillness. That's why God says, be still and know that I am God, because he's talking about a pillar of fire by night and a pillar of cloud by day. That is what led the Ark of the Covenant. So this is the infinite tree of life. Now, what happened is this tree was interrupted. This was the bite that was taken out of the apple. Okay, now let me show you that, because this is crazy. Now, why do I have this catch a fish inside his mouth? You will find a coin. Because this was a miracle that Jesus actually performed in the Bible. He told one of his disciples to go find a fish, go catch a fish, and in its mouth would be a coin. And what we're really looking at is the fish and the coin are actually on display here in the Vesica Pisces. You can see it here in the middle. It's shaped like a football, and it spins around, and down here is the tail of the fish, and this becomes the fish, and the coin in its mouth is the seed. And this is why Jesus says, as a child of Christ, you pay no tribute. Because Jesus was the one that made the fish and all the material realm made by his Father in heaven, all the material realm. So if you're a child of Christ and Christ isn't requiring you to pay tribute, then why should you pay tribute to Caesar? And that was the whole concept behind this. So here's the fish shape. This is why they use the fish shape for Jesus, to represent Jesus, because he is the crossing over of the two seeds. Now, all this is going to link into the head and heel prophecy, which is in the title of this video. And we'll get into more detail about how that fits in. The head and heel prophecy links directly in to the enmity between these two seeds. So when you're talking about these biblical ideas, they go deeper. It wasn't a literal fruit that Eve ate. When she took a bite out of the apple, what she did was she took a section out of the seed. Okay, so here is our crossing over of the two seeds. This is why Jesus represents the fish. You also notice the 153 in there. That is the mathematical equation of the Vesica Pisces. That's why Jesus caught 153 fish when he what? When he cast his net to the right side of the boat. Okay, he was basically telling you a mathematical equation. This is the coin. This was the drachma that Jesus told the apostle to catch in the river. And it has an owl on it. This is the dark seed. This is basically the incursion. You can see it here on display. This is the dark seed, the owl. This is Molech. When you look up in the night sky, you will see Molech on display. This is it here. This is the Ouroboros. And here you see the snake eating its tail. Okay, now this is the still part of the sky. This is the Milky Way. Here you see the serpent. There's his eye. There's his fang. There's his bottom of his mouth. And he's milk. M-L-K. Milk. Molech. M-O-L-E-K. Okay? So he's eating his tail, the Milky Way. And he spins around and round. This is also cosmic dust. This is the serpent eating the dust. This is all in the book of Genesis. What does that mean? It means that all of this below here is recycled dust. We live in the material realm of recycled dust. Jesus' heel is crushing the head of the serpent. This was one of the very first prophecies in the Bible. God said to the woman, you will crush the head of the serpent with your heel, and he will bruise you in the heel, and you will bruise him in the head. This is what they were talking about. Okay? Now, the heel represents this portion of the Vesica Pisces. It's a rounded edge, crushing back. So it's crushing back, okay? Taking back the seed, right? Now, how do you survive this? Comes the heel of the woman, crushing back the eyes of Molech, you see? Watch this. This is called the calcaneus. This is the heel of the prophecy of the woman and the serpent. It's rounded. It crushes back and takes back the seed of the woman. You notice that Jesus was crucified and the spike, the nail went through very close to the heel. His heel was bruised because he was the seed of the woman. The seed, the pure seed, before the incursion of the serpent into our genetic DNA. So this is what I believe that this represents in this prophecy. Now, this is where things get interesting, because if you look at the skin of a cobra, here are some images of it. It is a variation of the hexagonal honeycomb matrix. Look at this. What does that mean, Casey? Well, the hexagon, this shape, this basic shape, is the shape of the matrix. It is what imprisons us. And this hexagon really is a cube. This is why we have a cube-based society. What do you mean, Casey? How is a hexagon a cube? Let me show you. If you guys have any questions, any of this is unclear, pop it in the chat and I'll be in with you guys in a minute. And we can discuss it. Here is the hexagon, but you also see it is a three-dimensional cube. Okay? The hexagon is a cube. This is why all of our lives we spend in cubes. Okay? You have a cubicle when you go to work. Okay? Your houses are cube shaped. Everything is the cube. That's the matrix. That's what we're locked in. We're locked in this sinful matrix. Now, I wanted to show you the Eyes of Molech and why they worship the owl. And we can see this in time-lapse photography in the night sky. And it's also stop motion. And it's at the equator as well. And the sky only looks like this at the equator. This is the only place where you're going to see the stars do this. Here's the image here. This is the Eyes of Molech. Well, Casey, God created the stars. Yes, he did. But we are blocked from seeing the true nature of heaven. It's behind the mask of the owl, the mask of Molech. And part of this vortex, you see, this is also twin opposed vortex. What you're looking at is a giant apple core in the center here, moving in and around. But this is the dark side, okay? So you have the light side of God, the infinite toroidal field, the vortex, spinning in and around of itself, right? Just like we see here in the apple. This is why God is Elohim, because El means tree in Hebrew. It's the terebinth tree, and that's why God said, be fruitful and fill the earth. That was an analogy of the tree and bearing fruit, right? So when you look at this, you begin to see that this is the dark. This is why they worship Molech. The true glory of heaven is hidden behind here, okay? We're locked off from it. Now, it's interesting because in the book of Genesis, when Adam and Eve were cut off from the garden, right, where fruit grows, there were all these trees in the garden, right? When they were cut off, God set up 2 cherubim with their swords swinging around in a circle to guard the way back to the garden. And I believe that we're also looking at the 2 spinning swords of the cherubim. Do you see how the Bible makes so much more sense when you begin to look at things on these symbolic levels? Okay, so this is the static image of Molech and the serpent eating its tail, the curse of the dust. You will go on your belly and eat dust all the days of your life. This is the curse that God gave in the garden. And then we had the dynamic version, which is the spinning stars. So God has them both covered. And the heel is bruising the head of the serpent. The heel is destroying the matrix cube of the serpent skin. And to me, this all makes perfect sense. And we demonstrate in the Body Code series very specific nerves, the spear of destiny, and all these other nerves that overlay the Bible events, the crucifixion. And they had no idea the level of detail that is outlined in the Bible. No one knew the human anatomy of the body when some of these Bible books were written. Then, there's some debate about, with the New Testament, because it was in more recent history, and they did know some human anatomy. But in the Old Testament, long before detailed images were understood and detailed drawings and knowledge of anatomy was known, these Bible books were written. And they outline, basically the Bible overlays the human anatomy. The events of the Bible are played out to overlay parts of your body that nobody knew about. And I believe that God did this so that we can one day find the only true God, the God creator. Now, got to back that up, right? So I decided to look at the history of human anatomy to prove that, what level of knowledge that they had when these Bible books were written. Now, if you pull up this Wikipedia article, they tell you, they say that in ancient Egypt, anatomy is when they began to study anatomy, 1600 BC. Now, this predates when most of the Bible was written, but they don't tell you what they knew. They're being very vague here, and it's on purpose. They do cite this one document, the Edwin Smith Surgical Papyrus. Again, we're looking at ancient anatomy and what people knew and when. We're going to look at images of this. So this is the earliest form of human anatomy, the Edwin Smith Surgical Papyrus. Let's take a look at this. And this is what we're given. It's a medical text. There aren't even any images here. It was a document, and they said they found it in 1862. Okay. But it was dated back to 2000 BC or 1500 BC, a couple thousand years after the beginning of man. We talk about fractures, wounds, dislocations, and tumors. Okay, there are no detailed drawings of inner eye anatomy or anything like that. This is basic anatomical knowledge. And they say the Greeks took a stab at it in about 500 BC. Early scientist Alcmaeon began to construct a background for medical and anatomical science with the dissection of animals. Okay, so he was dissecting animals. Identified the optic nerves of the tubes, later termed eustachius. So he did see the optic nerves in these animals. And then things jumped to the 4th century BCE, Aristotle. So they were doing a lot of animal dissections. They found arteries and veins and the organs, of course. Those are easy to identify. But when you actually look at ancient human anatomy and the eye, there are very few drawings that predate the time of Christ. We look at some of the oldest drawings, and here are some of the oldest images. This one was from 1170, 1,000 years, 1,200 years after Christ walked the earth. As you can see, this is very basic knowledge. This looks like a cartoon drawing, okay? Same time frame, 1170 to 1199 AD. They weren't even sure how these structures worked. They thought that the soul resided in the stomach. They had all these misconceptions about anatomy. Now, the current knowledge of anatomy, this is 1543. So here you see things start to get a little more defined. They've identified all of the optic or the nerves in the brain. There are 12 sets, and here they've started to around 12 to 1500 AD to identify some of these major structures and what they actually do and what they're responsible for. But they did not know during the time of Christ what all these nerves do. Here's some of the earliest pictures of the eye. Let's go to the page here. See, it's very basic. This is 1604. Kepler, it looks like. First theory. This is actually the first theory of the retinal image. That didn't happen until 1604. When you look at the crucifixion, it was an analogy of your inner brain. Basically, Jesus was in the pineal position. He was in the pineal position, in the middle, between the two thieves at the crucifixion. And those thieves represent your eyes and your head. Looking out into the material is what deceives you. That is where we are tempted. That's where we are deceived when we have the sight. That's why Eve's eyes were opened. That is when the sin began to occur in the world. It was introduced when her eyes were open. She could see. She was deceived, right? Now, this is crazy because at the place where Christ was crucified, at the pineal position, he was on a cross. Well, your optic nerves, they come out of the back of your eyes. They cross in the middle, right where your pineal gland is in your brain. Now, this is crazy because not only do they cross at the center of your brain, this is the image that we're seeing here. Happy face, cross eyes. Now you know what this means. Okay? These are the two thieves at Jesus' side. In the middle, Christ is in the pineal position. You get it now? Hiding in plain sight. The two crucified thieves. Christ in the middle. Now, The place where Christ was crucified is called Golgotha. That means skull, place of the skull. So your eyes are in your skull. You've got the crossing optic nerves. You've got the two thieves, your eyes. You've got the pineal gland, which is Jesus. Jesus says, the eye is the lamp of the body, the eye, the single eye. If your eye is single, your whole body will be full of light. If your eye is dark, your whole body will be full of darkness. This is in the Bible. Well, it just so happens that the place where Christ was crucified is the same place where it is believed that Goliath's head that was cut off by David is buried. It is believed that it is buried at that spot, at Golgotha. That is where David buried the head of Goliath. And what happened to Goliath? Where did David shoot the smooth stone from a sling? Where did it land on Goliath? It landed in his pineal gland. So here you have this strange juxtaposition of the Holy Christ in the pineal position, and then the dark seed line of Goliath, the remnants of the Nephilim left over from the flood, him being hid in the pineal gland as well. You see that? You see how it all overlays? And then it all comes back to the enmity between the two seeds. The duality, the dimension of duality that we exist in. Now, it's important to understand this because this affects your life and how you interact in this reality with other people. It affects how you feel. It affects your goals. Everything that makes you a human being is affected by this dimension that we're trapped in. And you begin to wonder why we have identities as human beings. What's in an identity? When we really break this down, we begin to look at how we relate with and identify with certain groups, ideas, and beliefs. And then we wonder what role these beliefs play in shaping who we are. But most importantly, what role do these beliefs have in separating or dividing us from one another? And that will be the thing that we're going to be talking about today. And why do these beliefs divide us from each other? You would think that just because a person has a certain belief system, that belief system shouldn't be separating and dividing us from one another. But I'm going to explain to you why that happens. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil in the Garden of Eden is where all this begins. And I believe it has much deeper meanings than we were told. The meanings that we've been told, the paradigms that religion has taught us, Christianity, about what the tree of the knowledge of good and evil actually means. We're told that it is some unobtainable thing that the devil somehow maybe had power in or ruled over. We're told it's a physical tree. We're not told it's a real tree. I mean, a symbolic tree. We're told that it's like a real tree and that fruit came off of it. That's what we're told in the Christian paradigm, the Christian experience, right? But I believe that it is something deeper. I believe that this tree was actually a dimension. You see, when you think about what a tree is, it has a trunk, it has limbs that branch out. And for every reaction, there's an opposite and equal action. And each limb is dependent on the limb before it as you go back to the trunk of the tree. And so this tree that they're talking about, I believe is not a physical tree. I believe this was an actual tree that basically was a descriptive phrase for the dimension that we're in, which is the knowledge of good and evil, the knowledge of duality.
represented a physical and spiritual dimension of duality. Now, previously, the tree of life was set up to only be ruled by God, right? So God had this tree of life, and he told Adam and Eve, you may eat of this tree, the tree of life, and many other trees of the garden, but you may not eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Now, why would he tell them that? Well, the tree of life was the one that was ruled by God. A tree where you didn't have to make choices about good and evil. A tree where there wasn't opposites and duality. Many of the other trees probably also were based off of the tree of life model, except for the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And this is why God told them not to eat of it. The only way you can get to the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was through choice. Now, in perfect love, God had to allow choice. One choice was all it took. The choice to cross over into the dimension of duality. And before that, God was handling good and evil in the dimension for us. We only needed the tree of life and the other trees in the garden. So imagine what that would have been like. Only dependent on the tree of the life and the tree in the garden. There would have been no knowledge of good and evil. There would have been bliss. And God handled the universe in perfect balance. We had everlasting life because of it. And evil did not exist. Duality didn't exist. So when we entered this dimension of duality, it feels natural, natural to actually compete with one another. I've got a description here showing a race, because this is the natural state of affairs. Us in competition with one another. I believe at this point too, our brains were split. When we entered this, we underwent a physical change when we fell into this dimension. Kind of like certain trout in the ocean will undergo a physical change when they enter fresh water. They gain teeth and things like that. And I believe this exact same thing happened when we fell into this tree of good and evil. Now, God tells us to be still and know that he's God. And we'll get into this in a minute of what that actually means. Being still brings us back to the tree of life. The tree outside of duality and competition and the split brain thinking. That's why Christ was in the middle between the two thieves. The thieves actually represented good and evil. So you can almost look at this picture here and go, okay, if this was the tree, really the way to depict the tree of knowledge of good and evil is to depict two trees, because that's what it is. It's polarity. And then Christ is in the middle. He's trying to tell you to be still between the good and the evil. Not that you're supposed to be evil, but you're supposed to let go of the competition part of this life that we're told we need to be successful. Okay. There is no necessary evil. That doesn't exist. Now, the devil will try to tell you that there's necessary evil, that it's necessary to balance out the good, but that's not the case. So let's break down what it means that duality is one thing versus another in order to experience this dimension. We literally live in a dimension of duality where the tendency is for the two forces to oppose each other. Okay? Down to even the anatomical level. We see depictions of atoms, protons, neutrons, electrons, charges. And I believe that was what that ended up being, was the curse that was put upon mankind. Altered state of our existence once we crossed over into this realm, this dimension. Now, It isn't until we find the stillness, the space between, that we find the will of God. God says, be still and know that I am God. And what you have to understand about this dimension that we live in as well is that there's lots of imposters, hijackers. Let me go into the chat here and make sure we're still connected up. There are people out there that actually want to create a hall of mirrors, so to speak, to basically try and throw you off track. So what happens is you've got people out there that are trying to do this stillness thing without God without God handling it. And it's almost so obvious because what you'll see with some of these practices and religions is they'll actually do everything they can to remove God from the meditation and stillness. And so it reveals the deception, because you see them going out of their way to not talk about or mention God, but yet they're talking about stillness and meditation, which was in the Bible. God said, be still, know that I'm God. So do you ever wonder why achieving a goal that you'd worked so hard for is so satisfying? It's because it was opposed so heavily. Opposition, for some reason in this reality, brings satisfaction. It's almost sadomasochistic, the way that humans love torture and struggle. I've been around a while and I've talked to people in relationships that are bad, people in bad relationships. And usually the people who fight the most are the ones that are most in love with each other. It's just bizarre. And then you get into a relationship where things are easy, and a lot of people can't stay interested in those relationships. And I never understood that. After all the drama that I've been through in relationships, I thought to myself, man, wouldn't a person want a quiet, peaceful relationship where they're not fighting, there's not a bunch of drama? But you'd be shocked. Some people are addicted to the drama. Let me give you another example. Look at the energy surrounding professional team sports. And you wonder why. And it's because of the vendettas. It's because the opposition is so strong. It almost seems like the more drama and hype there is, the more gripping the victory, and the more people follow and get involved. Some of these Super Bowls, and you see this energy spilling out afterwards into the streets, and people just letting out all this energy because they have nowhere to place it. So they start rioting. This is part of the duality of the dimension we live in. People are addicted to opposition. We even see this on YouTube. You'll notice the more controversial and bizarre the topic, the more views a channel will get. Some of the lamest channels that spew the most disinformation on YouTube are the ones that are huge, with hundreds of thousands and millions of subscribers, making the most sensationalist claims that are almost never true. It's because as humans, we are addicted to this. And we're going to get into how detrimental this is, because the father of duality is the devil. Make no mistake about it. Now, God balances evil in this dimension with good. And that's how we know there's a God, because he tries to maintain he doesn't try, he does it because he is God. He maintains the balance of good and evil amidst the devil ruling this world. This is where we see miracles happening and hope. None of that is of the devil. That's God balancing the evil in this dimension. You'll also notice the more that the mainstream media pushes the race agenda, the more hatred there is on each side. Notice that? I would always ask people, what would happen if they just stopped talking about racial divide in the media? Racism would probably go away. But they keep showing one side and the other side, and they never come up with solutions. They just show each side at each other's throats. So in this realm of duality, it pushes people apart just by its very nature. Now, Christ opposed evil, but he did so at the source. And he has the right to do that because he's the Son of God, right? He opposed the reason for all evil, which is the devil. He took the blame off of people, the innocent bystanders and victims of the deception, and instead he focused on placing the blame squarely on those he knew understood the right-left paradigm and the devil himself. He knew that the Pharisees knew about this duality, and this is where we get some of the oldest forms of these games like chess, which illustrates the duality. White chess piece on black squares, black chess piece on white squares. These people understand the duality and opposition. And all of us are pawns in this giant chessboard we call life, right? So what did Christ do? He came and he basically acted as the tree limb on the bank of a river, pulling you out of the shifting current of the stream, pulling you out of the competition, out of the race, out of the opposing forces, okay? That's what Christ did, because he let you know that it's okay, that you don't have to compete in this world the way that the devil says. Education, rat race, materialism, government, all of these things set up these right-left paradigms. They set up the opposing forces. Okay? You would have never seen Jesus joining like a NFL football team. You just wouldn't do it, because the problem with the realm of duality is that when you force something, an opposite reaction happens on the other end. Someone on the other end, because of your taking and pushing and forcing, is going to suffer. And that opposes the law of love. The law of love, you're not supposed to, at someone else's detriment, steal someone's job or lay people off because you're in a growth mode, right? You see how all this works? We're supposed to be doing acts of kindness and love, not pushing our way through life, competing with other people. We have plenty of resources. Just went on a road trip across the entire country, United States, and I was shocked at how much empty land there was. 95% of the land of the United States is completely empty. And I thought to myself, all these people fighting it out on the coastlines for real estate, paying $500,000 to own a quarter of an acre of land that they think they own, but they really don't. Fighting tooth and nail in these jobs and these careers. For what? They can't even quantify the amount of land, free land and resources there are in the United States. Millions and millions of trees, open land, streams, water. But when you look at the media, they want you to believe that there's some kind of a shortage. Why? So they can control it all and push you into this duality. You get it now? You see how this works? By pushing you into the duality, they control you. By pushing you into a mindset that there is shortage instead of abundance, they control you, because that forces you to compete, because you think land is rare. You think there aren't any resources. You think we're always in a drought. That's why they talk about drought all the time. Drought, drought, drought. If there's such a drought, why do they shove so many people into a desert? You guys understand what's going on now. It's the land in the realm of duality. So let's talk a little bit more about the tree of life, which is only the tree of good, Okay, there's only good in the tree of life. It's a tree of God, and God is good, right? And that was God's original plan. There was no evil in the universe. There was no necessary evil. Evil came out of choice. Why? Because the devil loves, or because God loves everyone, even the devil. And in perfect love, you have to provide choice. So the devil had a choice called free will. And this is when sin entered the world. Why? Because the devil got jealous. He wanted to be like the Most High. And so instead of having everlasting life with the tree of life, we have birth, decay, and renewal. A spinning, endless cycle of destruction, an Ouroboros of reality. The snake eating its tail. This was not the original plan, as you know. So now you see that duality is of the devil. Competition, sides, teams, opposition, red, blue. So you must be still and know that he is God. That is the only way out, and that's what Christ was trying to show us. God came to earth in the flesh as the Messiah and shed his blood for our sins. If you think about it, it was really the perfect answer to the devil, who was thrown to earth and was the source of all sin. So you've got this juxtaposition, right? You've got the Messiah shedding his blood for our sins, and then on the other end, on the dark side, you've got the devil who was thrown to earth and was the source of all sin. Now, through his blood, Christ released the curse, binding us to the material death. The curse that is binding us to this earth prison, to this material plane, because we were in a fallen state after the fall of the garden. And as we discussed in a recent video, there are blue blood creatures, real creatures on this planet, in this reality, whose blood is based on copper. And that is what you're looking at on your screen right now. This is an actual representation of the molecular structure of protein of a spiny lobster, California spiny lobster. And this is the actual component of the blood called hemocyanin. Now, we talked about in a previous video that hemo means blood and cyan means blue, blue blood, and that this is a real blood for many creatures: squid, octopus, centipedes, spiders, horseshoe crabs. And it is a copper-based blood. It has copper in it. Now, it's interesting because copper, the Hebrew word for copper in the Bible, is nakosheth. Nakosheth. And the word for serpent is nakash. In other words, the two Hebrew words, copper and serpent, look very much alike. They're almost the same word. The copper seems to represent something impure, dirty. Now, Christ undid the copper serpent that Moses erected at Sinai. A lot of people don't understand why Jesus compared himself to this copper serpent that was put up on this pole in Sinai by Moses. They don't understand why Jesus would say that just as Moses raised up a copper serpent, so too the Son of Man will be raised up on a pole. They don't get why he said that. The reason why he said it is because he was differentiating the unclean blood, the blue bloods, from the holy seed line of Christ that would save all of us from the sin of the unclean blood. That's why he had to shed his blood. Now, isn't it interesting that doctors use, in the medical industry, uses the serpent wrapped around the pole as their symbol? Why would they do that? Because Jesus was a doctor. He was a healer. the healer of all healers and the doctor of all doctors, to put it correctly. Instead of using pharmakia, he used pure love and pure heart to heal people. And in fact, his first miracle that he ever performed was for doctors. How old was he when he performed that miracle? He was 12 years old. You can look that up for yourself. Now let's get into what this is all about, because this is where everything comes off the rails. These copper organisms have what is called a complex hexameric structure, and it looks like this. This is called a hexameric structure. Now, when you take a closer look at this, you can see why they would call it a hexameric structure. There is a hexagon inside, which we know is a 3D cube, but there's more to it than that. And I'm going to draw this hexagon in here so you can see it. Let's see here, because this is fascinating. Again, this is the hemocyanin structure of the actual hemocyanin crystal structure molecule. Let's open this image as a new tab. Now, why is it so important for us to understand what is going on here? Well, because this miracle of the blood is something that a lot of people don't understand. That how could God have known this? This legitimizes the entire Bible, because it actually shows that on a molecular level, God knows what's going on. A lot of people don't truly believe. They see things in a way that is not real. They basically think that the Bible is a bunch of myths. But when you get down to things like this, where you can actually show that the molecular structure of blood was known, this is where you get into when things get real. Now, many of you will see the Star of David in this image, and we did a video actually showing you how the Star of David shows up in this. And we all know that at the center of the Star of David is the actual hexagon. Now, this is the hex. It's the curse. This is what I've been trying to tell you guys. Here it is here. This is the hex at the center of this blue blood molecule. This is a copper-based organism. And as I said, the word copper and the word serpent are almost the same word in Hebrew. There's your hexagon, which is also a 3D cube. Now, this goes deeper. I want you to look and also see how this hemocyanin crystalline structure has an above and below component to it. Let's fill that in. Here is your below. It is an inverted triangle, like this. And your above is this triangle. And this, of course, makes the Star of David inside this crystalline structure. Is this all starting to sink in now? The actual true nature of why Christ had to do what he did. These are the blue bloods, the serpent incursion into the human race that needed to be corrected to give salvation to all who believe. If you believe, it doesn't matter what your blood is, blue blood or red bloods, you will be saved under Christ. That's why he had to come. Otherwise, you were cursed because the serpent came in. Now, you have an above and below. So someone had asked me, what does this mean? Well, this means that we are bound. The above and below is bound on this earth through the hex. I'll say that again. The above and below is bound on this earth through the hex, which is why the devil is stuck here. That's what this symbol really means. This is the Star of Remphan. It's the devil celebrating the fact that he has people bound in a curse, and that the devil's thrown down here and he's stuck here too. The above and below is linked together by this hex. Okay? This is why the North Pole of Saturn has a hexagon on it, bound by the magic ring, the magic circle around the planet. Now we're going to look at hemoglobin. And hemoglobin is amazing. This is crazy. This is iron-based blood. Okay? Iron-based blood. Now, you are going to see the very same above and below. When I saw this, I got chills. There is the above. Right there in the actual structure of iron-based blood. Here is the above. Here is the below. But what you're going to notice is that they are unbound. In other words, Christ unbound the curse that was holding us in to the hex. Notice the hex is gone. Again, this is hemoglobin molecule. This is the regular red blood molecules. It is unbound by the sacrifice. And you can almost see here also the number 9 and the number 6. That's the yin and the yang. That is God coming to earth as Christ. He had to come down to release the curse. Let me show you the 9 and the 6. If you're not seeing it yet. Here is the 9. And here is the 6. Again, this is a hemoglobin molecule. And I'll turn this on and off so you can see this. Now, this isn't open to debate. This is real. This isn't some trick to make people want to watch this channel. We're looking at the actual molecular structure and comparing hemoglobin to hemocyanin, the two different types of blood. Here's the 6 and the 9. What could that mean? It means that God came down to earth. He came down here to unlock us from the hex. Here's the hex. This is unbelievable. Now, to my knowledge, no one else has discovered this yet. But this opens up and unlocks all kinds of other keys. The hex is gone. Now we understand that the original prophecy of the bruising of the head and heel, now we know what that means because it's on display right here. That's what the yin and yang is. It's the bruising of the head and heel. It's the cycle. Let's look at the yin and yang so I can show you guys what this means. Yin and yang is the 69. But they've given it a cult meaning, right? They've hijacked this symbol. But what it really is, this is your hemoglobin on display right here. This is God coming to earth as Christ, releasing the blood curse that we were under. This is why everything is based on the blood. And there's the 69 right there. Now, many people believe that Christ was born in 6 BC. So now you have another component to this. But here's where things get utterly fascinating, because you can almost see the crown of thorns here in the center. And he was on the cross. What do you mean, Casey? Well, I'm going to show you something unbelievable. Now that we know what this blood means, okay? And this could be a crown of thorns, although it looks like a jumbled mess. But watch this. This is a wooden manger, probably the type of manger that Christ was born in. And look at this. There is your below, the arrow pointing down, born into this down realm, just like the arrow here, born in the manger. So what you're looking at here is the manger coming down in 6 BC. Here's your 6 BC. And then going on the cross back up. And watch this. The manger down, the cross up. I don't even know if you guys can see what I'm drawing here. This is the cross going up. So you have it all on display here in the hemoglobin molecule, the corrective blood of Christ. Correct us from the blue blood. Unbelievable. Now, if you look at blue blood and the explanations given to this, let's see if it's going here. Let's see. I think it's here. It talks about the 96%. Actually, this is red blood, sorry. Red blood cells, in mammals, the proteins make up 96% of the red blood cells' dry content by weight. I'll say that again. The protein in mammals make up 96% of the red blood cells' dry content. So you see that the number 96 is actually represented in the hemoglobin molecule. Let's take a look at that. Here it is here. In mammals, the protein makes up 96% of the red blood cells by dry content. So you can see it actually represented in the physical appearance of this hemoglobin structure, this crystalline structure. Well, that was the discovery, you guys. That's what I wanted to show you. And as far as I know, no one else has really looked at this.